So I know we all love the DJI Osmo Pocket 3 and the smaller Shy Girl vlogging cameras, and I do love me those, but I've been wanting to elevate my content ever so slightly, so I bought the Lumix S9, and let's talk about it. So today I'll be talking about the Panasonic Lumix S9 in mostly a very practical sense. I am just a basic vlogging lifestyle girly. Not to say that all lifestyle or vlogging content is basic. I'm talking about me. I'm basic. So I'll be talking about it in a mostly practical sense. So if you're looking for a really techie, technical spec type of review or first impressions, this may not be the video for you, but I do want to go over basic specs because I still do think that's important, especially for the normal consumer. So I got the Lumix S9. It is a full frame camera, which means the sensor is full frame. So this is a bigger sensor than most vlogging cameras. I got it with the 18 to 40 millimeter lens. So it's pretty versatile for vlogs and it's super wide, but also it can punch in if it needs to. Okay, that's a little too close. And it's a 24.2 megapixel camera and can shoot up to 6K. But if you're kind of curious about the specs, those are kind of the things that you can use and grow into if you're also looking at this camera. So now let's talk about why I upgraded my camera in the first place and then why I chose the Lumix S9. So as a little bit of background, I have the DJI Osmo Pocket. I have the DJI Action 4. If you want to see a comparison on that, I have a video in the cards kind of talking about that camera and comparing them to each other. And while those are really, really good cameras, I wanted something a little more. I was starting to feel a little boxed in by not having variable lenses, and I could only do so much with the DJI Osmo Pocket. You can zoom in, but it's a digital zoom, and I wanted something that had options. I might not be using the options right now, but I like the idea of just having the options and being able to switch the lenses when I want. For example, I tried using the wide angle kind of magnet lens on the DJI Osmo Pocket 3, and it was terrible. I think it looked really bad. I also wanted better image and video quality, and while, 4K is 4K, I just feel like because the sensor was so small, it's a 1-inch sensor, I believe, on the DJI Osmo Pocket 3, I just feel like there is a cap to what the image quality can be. And now kind of going into more specific things of why I chose the Lumix S9. So a lot of the things I've just mentioned, I could have bought almost any camera. I could have gotten like a ZV-E10. Those are really popular, or the A6700, or some Canon cameras. There's like a plethora of interchangeable lens cameras, but the reason why I chose this one specifically is because I liked the 6K open gate. So 6K, just like 4K higher res, but the open gate kind of just gives me a little bit more flexibility. So to kind of explain open gate, when you're filming a video with a camera, it's most likely 16:9, and you're kind of stuck at that kind of aspect ratio. But with open gate, it films at the full sensor. I believe it films at 3:2 or 3:2. I'll put the correct ratio here. And then with this, you can either make it horizontal, 16:9, or you can make it vertical, 9:16. So almost anything I film can be turned into a short or into vertical content, and it can be made into horizontal content. And then some other things is that this camera has really good in-body stabilization. So when you're walking around, you'll see the jitters for a lot of cameras. This Panasonic camera, I heard, has pretty good in-body stabilization, and I'll say it's pretty decent. There are some clips that I'll show you a little bit later when we get into kind of a light comparison. Nothing will be as smooth as the gimbal on the DJI Osmo Pocket 3, but for what this camera is and compared to other cameras, it is a lot better, I think. And following along the in-body stabilization, this camera has pretty good autofocus. I know Sony's kind of the market leading, or they're the best with autofocus, but this camera does really, really well as well. There was one video where I literally was filming like for 40 minutes and I wasn't in focus. I think that was my fault though, user error. Ever since that, I've never had an issue with autofocus since then though. So I would say pretty good autofocus for what I need. And then just one last thing, I was really choosing between this Lumix S9 and then the Sony a6700, but I decided to go with the Lumix S9 mostly because of the 6K open gate and the kit lens. The kit lens on this Lumix S9 is a lot wider than what I would get with the a6700. And while I do want the freedom of multiple lenses, I didn't want to have to buy an extra lens at first. And the lens that I would want that's super wide for the a6700 cost like $700. This out of the box was everything I could want and more, so I went with the Lumix S9. Alright, so we talked a little bit about why I wanted to upgrade, why I chose the Lumix S9, so let's kind of do a very light comparison of the Lumix S9 to the DJI Osmo Pocket 3. I know this is not a fair comparison because the DJI Osmo Pocket 3 is a 1-inch sensor, this is a full frame camera. It's like comparing apples to oranges, but sometimes I feel like you have to compare an apple to an orange to know which one you prefer at the moment. Sometimes I want something crisp and sweet, sometimes I want something a little more citrusy. So even though it's not the best comparison, I feel like it's something that can be helpful for someone choosing which camera they want or which one fits them better. Got a few clips to hopefully give you a slight comparison between the two cameras. So let's get right into those. Alright, so I'm going to be showing you guys some clips between the DJI Osmo Pocket and the Lumix S9. Right now, I'm just kind of sitting here in the shade, and in both I'm going to be shooting in 4K 30 auto, and we'll just see how it looks. Everything's kind of automatic default settings. Alright, and this is what low light looks like. I'm pretty sure the DJI Osmo Pocket is a lot brighter, but which one has lots of noise? And this is one thing I didn't like about the DJI Osmo Pocket. It's just so overexposed that when it's exposed properly, it's too bright, and when it's dark, it's okay, I guess. So usually when I use the DJI Osmo Pocket, I lower the exposure levels a little bit, but everything's on auto right now, as I mentioned before. And this is how things look and how things turn out. I wonder if this full frame is really helping a lot of the noise, but I guess I'll have to see a little bit in post. But yeah, this is kind of what low light looks like. We have no lights on, nothing. We have a window with our blinds closed, so some light is coming in, but for the most part it's actually pretty dark. And the Lumix S9 is a lot more representative of what it looks like inside right now. But yeah, that's low light for you guys. Okay, editing me here, looking at the footage and sharing some thoughts. So here we're outside. As I mentioned, I do kind of like the colors on the Osmo Pocket better. It's slightly warmer, little less pink. But looking at the actual image and like zooming in, the quality of the Lumix S9 is just way better. I think it's sharper, there's a lot more clarity, and just looking at the backgrounds, you could definitely see that the depth of field is way different. Like, we get so much more depth of field on the Lumix S9 compared to the Osmo Pocket 3. And I think there is more dynamic range in the Lumix S9. The darker colors are dark and the brighter colors are bright. And there is contrast there, whereas in the Osmo Pocket 3, like if we're comparing my hair color and my hoodie at the time, those are dark in the Lumix S9, and in the DJI Osmo Pocket 3, they are lighter. So I guess it just depends if you like a little more contrast or less contrast. I'm not really using the Lumix S9 for its auto coloring. The reason why I got it, I don't know if I've said already. I might talk about it a little bit more later, but I do want that creativity and getting the chance to color grade. So even though I'm comparing these auto, for those of you who want to see it, I personally won't be using auto. So yeah, there's a little more oomph for me in the Lumix S9. And then let's go back to this one, kind of the dark low light. Again, here we get that kind of dynamic range. I'm not sure if that's the right term, but the brightness definitely matches what the room is. Like, the Lumix S9 is dark, but that's the purpose. It was meant to be dark. But the Osmo Pocket 3, it looks like it was pretty bright, but in the room at the time, it was actually really dark. So I like that the Lumix S9 captures the actual brightness of the area but still keep it very crisp. I'm currently zooming in and looking at the backgrounds. I mean, honestly, the DJI Osmo Pocket 3 is still doing really well in terms of low light, but I do see a little bit more noise in the photo or in like the image or video for the Osmo Pocket 3 compared to the Lumix S9. And again, I do like the brightness levels that the Lumix S9 gives. It does feel more real and has a little more contrast, so I could play with things a little bit more. But yeah, overall, I do enjoy the Lumix S9 video better. So those were kind of my thoughts on the image quality, those comparison clips between the DJI Osmo Pocket 3 and the Lumix S9. But now, outside of just image quality and stuff, I wanted to talk a little bit about my experience using the Lumix S9 compared to the DJI Osmo Pocket 3 and just in general. So first of all, ease of use. You are definitely gonna have a so much easier time with the DJI Osmo Pocket 3, not gonna lie. It just feels so much easier, more intuitive, and the kind of minimalist interface makes it so easy to just get started. There are settings that you can change once you're ready, but if you're literally just starting off and have never touched a camera in your life, you can literally just get started and it will look pretty good. With the Lumix S9, you have so many buttons, so many dials, so many menu settings, it is a little overwhelming. I kind of grew up using a DSLR. I loved cameras, so I've had experience with cameras, but making the switch to this camera from the DJI Osmo Pocket 3, it did take a hot second for me to get used to it again and reuse those camera neurons in my brain. So yeah, I think the Lumix S9 is a little bit harder to use than the DJI Osmo Pocket 3. And as an example, let's say brightness levels. If you don't like the exposure level or the brightness in the DJI Osmo Pocket 3 automatic setting, you can lower that easily. You just go into like a swipe and then you go, I think it might be negative 0.7 or something. I don't know exactly what it is, but you can easily adjust the brightness levels through just a dial. But with the Lumix S9, you have to know your ISO, your aperture, and all of that. You can't just be like, hey, okay, I want this a little less bright. You have to know how to adjust the settings to get the exposure that you want. So the Lumix S9 is definitely, in terms of, I guess, like settings and adjustments, is not the easiest. Secondly, this camera is not shy girl friendly. I am shy girl. I don't like vlogging in public, which is why I don't, even with the DJI Osmo Pocket 3, because I usually just vlog at home. No one sees me, so I'm not afraid of pulling out my camera. But if you are wanting to vlog in public and use a camera in public, if you're a shy girl in that sense, this camera will bring attention. So those were kind of some thoughts on ease of use. Now getting into some other things, I talked about that lost focus at one point. I literally was talking for 40 minutes, didn't realize I wasn't in focus, because now that I actually have this camera, I have to look into the lens rather than look to the side at myself. On the Osmo Pocket 3, the lens and the screen were so close together that I can look at the screen and it kind of looks like I'm looking at the lens. But now I can't do that. Now I actually have to look at the lens and not at myself, and sometimes my framing is bad. And I might have pressed the screen, making it lock focus somewhere else. I have no idea what happened, but that is my own fault. Like I said previously, it's never happened since then, but I did want to mention that I've never had that problem with the DJI Osmo Pocket 3. It just locks focus properly. And I also talked about this a little bit previously, but the in-body stabilization, or IBIS, is pretty good on this camera. People say it's kind of the market leader, but the gimbal will just be superior. I brought this camera on one of my venue tours, and if you see the clip, it's really shaky, and I kind of watched my venue tour video on 2x speed, and I got motion sick because of how shaky it is. It is my fault because I wasn't standing there trying to be careful. I literally was just like walking, holding the camera. There are some clips that are pretty good and stable, but it's still not gonna be better than a gimbal. A gimbal is just better. I'm not faulting this camera because it's not a gimbal, and you can't expect this to be better than a gimbal, but it is just something I wanted to mention because it might be important to some people, especially if you're an on-the-go vlogger who's always walking and talking. This camera might not be for you. no matter how good the in-body stabilization is. And then lastly, this also kind of ties into ease of use. I actually do more work now that I use this camera. With the DJI Osmo Pocket 3 and the Action 4, I totally just take whatever footage it gives me and then that's that. But here I do a lot more post-production to color grade, because right now I am recording with Vlog, which is kind of that gray flat video, and then I color grade. So I do more work, but I'm choosing to do that. And the reason I bought this camera is to use those slightly more advanced features, and that will come with work. So while this camera is great and it has so many good features, it is something that you will have to work with and honestly have to spend a little more time with your videos. And with all of that being said, this camera is definitely not for someone who's just on the go vlogging or someone who wants to make videos as easy as possible. I was at a point previously where I was just trying to push out as much content as possible, and the Osmo Pocket 3 and Action 4 were definitely the best cameras for that. They were so easy to just pull out and use, and it made making content so easy. But for me, I was losing a little bit of that creativity. Excuse me, camera died. But as I was saying, if you do want more control, if you do want those extra settings to be able to change, if you do want to be slightly more creative with your shots, with your color grading, but if you do kind of want all of those things, I think this camera is a next great step or additional camera in the lineup. But yeah, that is the Lumix S9, all of its quirks, kind of my experience with it personally and how I've used it so far. And I'm super excited to see where this camera takes me in the future. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video. See you guys in the next one. Bye.